Thank you for staying with us here on The Right Stand. Now we're going to get you, ladies and gentlemen, evidence that think tanks that are operating on foreign soil, how they are going about this break India, defame India business, stitching up this anti-Indian narrative. They are also now trying to weaponize journalism. They are paying people, Indians and journalists, to come up and write against India, to fit a particular narrative which enemies of Bharat will use to try and shift the discourse away from us. Also try and weaken us civilizationally, weaken our narrative to the world and our story to the world, and create a particular impression on parts of the world that for the moment are defining world policy. It's a big, mega Right Stand exclusive. So, weaponizing journalism, stitching up these anti-Indian narratives. This is what intel sources are telling CNN News 18, that Indian journalists are on the radar of US-based think tanks that are supported by Pakistan and also other Islamist forces. Journalists have been asked to highlight atrocities, so-called atrocities of the Indian government and the agencies. Journalists have been asked to send a one-sided report that is a skewed narrative that targets Indian government, and it's not the current disposition. The story remains the same irrespective of which government is there, because their overall objective is to defame Bharat, derail Bharat. Now, Pak Americans have been linked to the ISI, who are linked to the ISI are roping in Indian journalists for propaganda, and one of these names that keeps doing the rounds is somebody who's been incarcerated by the US authorities in the past, is now out and he's active again, and that is Ghulam Fai. Think tanks offering minimum $1,500 for anti-India reports. Indian journalists are later given specific propaganda assignments based on how they write their report. And what happens is you get 50% or some amount of the money upfront the moment you send in your article, and then if it's approved and it's published, then you get the balance amount. That's how it works. How's the modus operandi? Grant programs that are launched for quote-unquote independent projects. So if you look at it on paper, technically, legally, they seem to be very benign, very sound. There's no need to arm. But you know what the intent is. But you can't stop them for putting out what they are wanting to put out. Grant programs have Indian journalists on their radar. It's the money that lures them in. And of course, you have to tap in and just skew it for us. And then you get the money. Programs promoted to focus on the marginalized. Muslims, Dalits, that's where the narratives need to be done. The marginalized is aimed in that direction. Programs tailored to human rights, religious freedom. Now, there you go. That's what it indicates. So the words, our texts are very, very clearly indicative. You know what I mean, kind of thing. But they will not say it explicitly because that protects them legally and you cannot go after them. Promises given to circulate work in reputed media houses. That's what is said. You send us your article, we'll get it published here, we'll get it published there. And you know where it's getting published where. Grants per story as high as $1,500 or 1.22 lakh rupees per story. Payment first after acceptance, that is half of the amount, and the second payment is once your work is published. And once it's published, then it just starts again and again and again. You keep getting paid for writing. And that brings us to the question, are they paying to defame Bharat and paying journalists themselves? So weaponizing journalism is another term that comes to mind. Pak anti-India narrative is the hashtag. Let's go across to our guests right away and ask them. They're all American residents who have been somewhere or the other either highlighting this, facing this, and seeing this around them. Purnima Nath, policy analyst, is with us. We also have Dr. Lavanya Vemsani, professor at the Shawnee State University at the Ohio State in USA, and Patay Suresh Krishnamurthy, board member of Kohana, is also joining us from Atlanta. Namaste and greetings on the occasion of Saraswati Puja and Navratri. And but this has also come to the fore. We have actually, our team stumbled upon an ad that was put out which listed these. And this is another active American think tank backed by Pakistani and of course this entire group And I know a lot of you have been studying this. Lavanya Vemsani ji, let me start with you. Is this a new phenomenon or has this been going on for a while?
It's thank you. It's been going on for a while. It's been noted earlier. The think tanks sought and got funding from nations that support terrorism, Pakistan and others. This has been known. It has been noted. So it is there. But it has taken a ugly turn now. It's leading to lots of fake news. Of course, it is being published on some media channels, but at the same time, snippets of it are also circulated on social media, which is leading to violence, which is actually it's anti-India rhetoric, but it's actually attacking Hindus and Indians living abroad, in the West specifically. So this fake news, recent attacks are already known in the US, a number of desecrations, but direct attacks are noted in Leicester, but this has been noted, and we have discussed, Anand, if you remember,
yes.
in August about the fake news, and I warned about it. This might lead to more violence and problems within these host nations. It's for the host nations and democracies to take action against these sort of things. Paid journalism, paid propaganda is never qualifies as journalism. So this has to be noted as advertised or paid piece. This can be taken to judiciary and it can be made accountable. But democratic nations have to come together and prepare a policy on sharing information on concerning issues, as well as these media narratives. And an action plan has to be put forward, because this is happening in almost all democratic nations. It's happening in India, and it's being exported to the West. It's happening in Germany, in Europe, many nations, England recently, and it has been happening repeatedly since 2000s in the US and Canada. North America is not spared. There are lots of incidents that also happen here. The reason always given is there is marginal treatment, marginalization in India, and that's no reason to attack Indians or Hindus outside of America, outside of India. But that is what is happening. It is anti-India rhetoric, but in action, it is actually perpetrating as violence against Hindus and Indians living abroad, living in Western nations. Isn't it important for the Western nations to treat all its citizens equally and take action on violent elements like this?
The fair questions that you asked, but Suresh ji, before I bring in Purnima ji, Suresh ji, this is I have every right as a think tank to ask people to write for me. What's wrong if I'm asking for stories on marginalized sections of society who need greater representation? And what's wrong if I'm paying a journalist to do some work? I'm soliciting work and I'm offering to pay. This is all perfectly legal. You can't attach any motive to me.
Yeah, and the way you present it, it's all so reasonable, isn't it? The key here is, as the recent report by the Network and Cajun Research Institute out of Rutgers University showed, this kind of trolling for news has got a very dangerous real-life effect. Because what happens is, these stories, they are put out on social media, they are put out on news magazines, on reputable newspapers. Like, for example, the advertisement that you were referring to yesterday, it appeared in the New York Times. Now, as one wag pointed out, they kind of wasted their money, because New York Times, even without all those ads, is significantly and systematically Hindu-phobic and anti-Bharat anyway. So I don't know why they spent the money on that. But it has a real effect. And the real effect is in social media, when organizations post these, it gets amplified by a well-defined group of people across multiple sectors. I'll give you an example. The New Jersey, the Teaneck Democratic Committee sent out a press release calling for an FBI investigation into half a dozen completely legitimate 501c3 charitable organizations in the United States simply because they were highlighting Hindu causes. That information was immediately picked up by a host of people, both in the popular press as well as in academia, and it is broadcast very widely. The net result is these organizations such as ourselves, where all we are doing is working for Hindu American causes in the United States, we have to spend time and energy, and that I think is the goal, is to distract us from the tasks of what we are trying to do and instead force us to focus on issues that really have no basis in reality. So every time somebody puts a lie out this in public, there are two things that happen. Those that believe the lies tend to take matters into their own hands and start to go down this path of hate. And those that know that these are lies are now forced to spend time and energy defending it. So, for example, 2 days ago, and schoolyard bully tactics. 2 days ago, IAMC, the founder of IAMC or the president of IAMC, he posted on Twitter basically asking why Pona is aligning itself with Nazi-friendly RSS. Now, this is a very typical narrative that they post up. Now, we know this is a schoolyard bully taunt. We are not going to respond to this kind of nonsense. But the fact is, it's out there in the public. We now have to defend it. So the whole point of the point of your question is well taken. What is wrong with just paying somebody to write an opinion? Well, what is wrong is when the opinion is false and is deliberately intended to mislead, it has real societal issues. Now, the irony is the people who are amplifying this, calling Hindu organizations terroristic organizations, themselves have an extremely well-defined connection, well-documented, well-defined connection to several terrorist organizations. I mean, the chief of IAMC has praised ISIS in the past. Ajit Sahi, who's a spokesperson for IAMC, has asked, why shouldn't ISIS kill other people? Or how did ISIS become a terrorist organization when they moved from Syria to Iraq and things like that? So, yeah, these have real world consequences. They're very dangerous. And it is time that we called it out. It is time that people recognized how divisive and how dangerous this stuff can be.
But Purnima ji, how they are allowed a free run because the way they have written the literature, the way they are soliciting, and the way they are going about it is perfectly legal as far as American standards is concerned. Indians may have concern about what's being done, but there's nothing that stops them.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening to your audience as well. मैं एक बात से शुरू करना चाहती हूँ. IAMC की Twitter page आप देखेंगे. So the first 8 minutes ago they have posted something called Global Solidarity with Defenders of the Indian Constitution. I broke into laugh because if you look at it, Indian Constitution was written totally anti-Hindu. It was not considerate about Hindus at all. And India bana kaise hai? At this point of time, if we don't talk about the facts and the creation of Pakistan, because Muslims wanted it, 98% Muslims wanted creation of an Islamic state, and that's Pakistan. Today we don't talk about it, and Muslims are the defenders of Indian Constitution. Are you kidding? On top of it, you have organizations like Hindus for Hindu genocide or whatever.
Hindus for human rights, yeah.
Human rights, yeah. They are not Hindu organization. They're using Hindus, and it's perfectly legal. You're talking about legality here, and this is all okay. Where is India on it? When New York Times was looking for a reporter, hiring for a reporter in Delhi, anti-India, anti-Hindu, anti-Modi, India couldn't do anything. In New York Times is still there in India. It's the same thing. Professor was talking right before that at this point of time, they actually have everything legal, whether it's a political association, whether it's media association, whether it is academia. We Hindus have failed in every category. We don't have voice. Even if we do, we are suddenly labeled as RSS, we're suddenly labeled as Bhakt, suddenly labeled Sanghis, suddenly labeled as Nazis. I mean, these are some labels that are used against us, extremist. So why is it
So are you saying that they have mastered the art of the discourse or manipulating the discourse?
Absolutely.
In this case, because Dr. Lavanya Vemsani, let me just circle back and bring in everyone. Dr. Lavanya, so they can cancel out somebody, they can label somebody, they can push out somebody, they can decide who can deliver a lecture, who cannot, who can come to a city, who cannot. They can decide who can protest and who cannot. But you don't have right to express yourself. You don't have right to challenge anybody, and you don't have the right to go ahead and put your point of view. So this is absolute wokeism that's going on.
Exactly. That's what is going on. They're putting these fake narratives and fake news, if I may. But anytime any of us oppose it, we are called here all kind of labels. And, we are hunted with all these labels and cancelled out. So as you said, this results in not being invited to speak, not being out there to put our opinions out. So our voice is silenced. Our voice all of the time is being silenced. In their quest for anti-India narrative, anti-Hindu narrative, they have found Indians, because Hindus are a minority here in the US, they found Hindus as a perfect target. It's very easy to target them. It's very easy to label them. And no narratives, no fact checks are coming from India. And in the West, we are such a small minority that it's very easy to silence our voice as extremists or somebody supporting the ruling party. Even though we're not associated with any ruling party or anything happening, we are all living in US for...
You may be small in number, but you're quite sizable in the economic contribution and the intellectual contribution that you're giving to a nation like the United States of America. And if they're operating, even in Canada, there is a sizable Indian diaspora which is there, which has huge amount of heft. But Pattai Krishnamurthy, how is it that they have the amount of money to give $1,500 per article? Even I am tempted to write if they're going to give so much of money. But where are they getting the money from? Because it's supposed to be the Indian Americans who are the wealthiest.
Yeah, there are a couple of answers to that. So as Professor Vemsani pointed out, there is certainly a lot of pressure on Hindus in general. But again, I don't want to paint the picture as too bleak. America, for the most part, it's a fair nation. It's a nation of laws. We don't, in the US, we have a very strong constitutional protection for people. We have First Amendment rights. Hindus have First Amendment rights like everybody else. It's a matter of raising the issue in the right forum in the right way. So, for example, at Kona, we had a presentation with lawmakers. We had a Hindus on the Hill Day on September 21st, where over 15 lawmakers sent their representatives or came in person to hear us out. And we are making inroads into the political space. Now, you asked the question, where is the money coming from? The Middle East Forum, Sam Westhrop of the Middle East Forum did a detailed analysis of just 25% of registered Islamic charities in the United States. And he found that they own a staggering $6.5 billion in assets. And they raise, on average, about $1 billion every year for various charitable causes. So you put $1.2 billion on one side, and you put $1,500 for an article on the other side, and you know how easy it is. What is the answer to this? The answer is we should use the mechanisms that are available to us. We should use the channels that are open to us. We will continue to engage with lawmakers. We'll continue to shed light on these kinds of activities. We'll continue to ignore the schoolyard bully tactics of organizations like the IAMC, but we will continue to work for and raise funds for And that's what the most important thing is. Sarah Gates pointed this out a couple of weeks ago on your program as well, Anand, that Hindus in the United States have to come together, and not just in the US, throughout the world. They have to come together, they have to organize, they have to fund their own activities, and they have to raise the voice in opposition. The channels are there. We have the platform if we choose to use it. The platforms that are available to the IAMCs and the SAHIs and the HFHRs of the world are also available to CONA and HAF and other such organizations.
Now here is the thing. Now, the information that we have is that these organizations are all Pak-backed or Pakistan ISI-backed. There's deep state money that's coming in. There are Islamist forces behind who are doing it. But Purnimaji, let me understand. Is this an India versus Pakistan narrative or anti? Or is it a Hindu versus Muslim narrative? The moment it becomes Hindu-Muslim, there could be Indian citizens also involved, and it becomes a religious binary, and it's not a national equation. Or are they correlated? How would you look at this?
It's actually, as you can understand, there is a Ghazwa, there's a fight happening to conquer India. So it's by hook or crooks, they want to conquer India. Islamic supremacy is so vile in terms of gathering Hindus also under the garb of democracy, under the garb of a false pretense of human rights. And they are actually inciting and actually inspiring Hindus to go join in them. And if you talk about Hindus for Human Rights, they are not a Hindu organization. They're using Hindu names, and there are several names which is Hindu. And if you talk about Miss Sunita Vishwanathan, is she Hindu really? Or what about Nikhil? Are they really Hindus? Or what about other organizations like Amnesty, who's working together? And including George Soros' connections. So it's actually not just Hindu against Hindu. It's India. They want to conquer India by hook or crook. Now, how are they able to do it though? They cannot do it without Hindu alignment. So there are a lot of pawns, Hindu pawns are part of them. And which is what I've seen in India, several Hindus seem to be speakers for dismantling global Hindutva. And there are several Hindus and Sikhs. If you look at IAMC, you have seen a Sikh, a woman, she's comparing her turban as a hijab, and it has become a sort of like a news because she's defending hijab in India where there is no communication.
The world is breaking up against protesting against hijab and standing up with the Iranian women, and then there are these people who are trying to advocate that in India, which is far ahead in terms of thought and equality. These 9 days are celebrating the feminine spirit. Where else, what else do you want as an example? Well, we will take this conversation forward, but thank you for your time. I have also run out of time here on this edition of The Right Stand. Thank you. Stay with us. Brass Tacks with Zakana.